Hi there, I'm Anissa, and this is the story of how I went from quietly surviving in my family's house to realizing I was never truly welcome. One night, a full dining table, no seat for me or my daughter, just smiles, laughter, and an empty space where we should have been. It broke something inside me. But was that moment really the beginning of the end? Have you ever felt invisible in a room full of people who were supposed to love you? Let me know in the comments. The cold air bit through my jacket as I hurried up the walkway, the porch lights casting a warm glow that didn't quite reach the pit of my stomach. I clutched the small gift bag tighter, the cheap tissue paper crinkling under my fingers. Mira skipped beside me, her excitement pure, oblivious to the gnawing tension in my chest. Tonight was supposed to be simple, a family dinner, a small intimate gathering. At least, that's what they had said. Inside, the house buzzed with laughter and the clinking of silverware. The smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon filled the air, momentarily fooling me into thinking everything was okay. I stepped into the dining room, my heart faltering. Every seat at the long, polished table was filled. Carla tossed her hair over her shoulder and gave me a fleeting glance before turning back to her conversation. Marlene adjusted the salt and pepper shakers, deliberately avoiding my gaze. Victor caught my eye for half a second, gave a tight nod, and went back to his plate. No one said anything. No one made room. I stood there, Mira squeezing my hand, her little face looking up at me in confusion. Rosa, the housekeeper, noticed. She gestured awkwardly toward the kitchen with a soft, apologetic smile. There was a folding table set up by the back door, cluttered with leftover chairs and a dented cookie tin. I swallowed hard, smiled tight, guided Mira towards the kitchen without a word. The small stool wobbled under Mira as she sat, her legs swinging silently above the floor. I perched beside her on an old metal chair, pretending I didn't see Carla's smirk, pretending I didn't hear the loud, carefree laughter erupting from the dining room, pretending I didn't care. The cold from the tile seeped into my shoes. I reached for the gift bag, now crumpled in my lap, and set it quietly beside Mira's plate. She beamed up at me, grateful for something, anything that made her feel seen, but I couldn't shake the sinking feeling in my chest. As Mira nibbled at her roll, I drifted back. Her first birthday, the pink cupcakes I baked from scratch because no one else bothered to show up. How she'd clapped her frosting-covered hands together and laughed like the world belonged to her. When had we become invisible? The clink of a champagne glass broke the spell. I looked up to see Carla standing, a flute of sparkling cider raised high. "To new beginnings," she toasted, her voice syrupy, triumphant. New beginnings. I gripped my coffee cup tighter, knuckles whitening. Across the room, no one looked our way. Mira chewed quietly, oblivious to the ceremony from which we were so neatly excluded. Maybe it was the way Victor laughed at Carla's joke without a second thought. Maybe it was the way Marlene leaned in, doting over the newborn cradled in Carla's arms. Or maybe it was simply the way the house seemed smaller now, like it had shrunk to push us out. Something inside me shifted. Maybe it's time for a new beginning of my own. The backyard felt smaller somehow, the brittle December air cutting sharper than it should. Mira's boots squelched against the muddy patches left over from yesterday's rain, her small hands tugging at the sleeves of her oversized jacket. I tried to smile, to pretend that stepping outside for a few minutes could scrub away the bitter residue clinging from the night before. Holiday decorations, half sagging under the weight of forgotten cheer, fluttered weakly in the cold breeze. Plastic candy canes leaned sideways, the wreath on the back door missing a few pine cones. Mira didn't seem to notice. She ran ahead, giggling as her boots slid over the wet grass. For a fleeting moment, I let myself breathe. Then she tripped. Her tiny body hit the gravel with a sickening thud, and a wail tore from her lungs, raw and piercing. I was moving before I even knew it, my heart hammering against my ribs, gravel digging into my knees as I scooped her up. From the corner of my eye, I saw the kitchen door swing open. Marlene. She stood there for a heartbeat, holding a dish rag, her gaze landing briefly on Mira's crumpled form. Without a word, she turned and let the door swing shut behind her. I blinked against the sudden sting in my eyes, pulling Mira closer. Her sobs rattled against my chest, shuddering through every piece of me. A low chuckle drifted across the yard. I turned my head to see Carla, coffee mug in hand, leaning lazily against the porch railing. Her mouth curved into something that might have been a smile if not for the coldness in her eyes. "If she can't even handle a little fall," she said, her voice light but cutting. "Good luck surviving the real world." The words hung there, thick and oily, sinking into the cracks already spreading through me. I wanted to scream. Instead, I bent my head lower, whispering nonsense into Mira's hair, my hands gentle as I wiped the dirt and blood from her scraped knees. Mira sniffled, hiccuping between tears. "Did Grandma see me?" I forced a smile that hurt my face. "She didn't notice, sweetheart." It was a lie, and we both knew it. Inside, the warmth of the house felt hollow. Carla's laughter floated through the kitchen, Marlene's voice chiming in as if nothing had happened. I carried Mira up the stairs, each step heavier than the last, each silence stretching wider between us. In our room, I tucked Mira onto the bed, her arms wrapping tightly around her favorite stuffed bear. She fell asleep quickly, exhaustion stealing her away from the ugliness of the day. I sat beside her, the glow of my phone screen reflecting off tear-blurred eyes. Slowly, almost without thinking, I typed, "Affordable Apartments Asheville," into the search bar. It felt like betrayal, like giving up. But deep down, in the place where survival instincts buried themselves like seeds, I knew it wasn't betrayal. It was the first step toward something better. Saturday mornings used to feel sacred, little pockets of calm carved out from the chaos of the week. But that morning, the house felt hollow and too loud at once. I wanted to spend it quietly, just Mira and me, building forts out of pillows and pretending the world outside didn't exist. I was rummaging through her closet for her favorite sweater when I noticed it. The shelf where I had neatly stacked the keepsakes, Mira's baby blanket, her first Halloween costume, that tiny pink jacket she wore home from the hospital, was half empty. A sinking feeling gnawed at my stomach. I checked the laundry room, then the spare room, telling myself it was probably moved for cleaning. But a sliver of fear whispered otherwise. Through the back window, I caught a glimpse of Carla in the backyard. She was tossing bags into a heap near the garage, her face set in a mask of casual disinterest. I slipped on my coat and stepped outside, the cold slicing through me sharper than the December air had any right to. My breath caught when I saw it. Mira's pink baby blanket, the one I had clutched during the worst nights after the divorce, the one that had soaked up so many of her toddler tears, was crumpled at the edge of the pile like a discarded rag. I moved on instinct, crossing the yard in a few quick steps. I picked it up, shaking off the dirt, clutching the fabric to my chest. Carla stood a few feet away, sipping coffee from a steaming mug, her mouth curling into a smirk. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Behind me, the screen door creaked open. Marlene leaned out, eyeing the scene with mild irritation. "It's just old junk, Anissa," she called lazily. "Let it go." And then she was gone, the door swinging shut with a soft finality that echoed louder than any slam. I stood there for a long time, the weight of the blanket pulling me downward. It wasn't about the fabric. It never was. Later that afternoon, as I passed the nursery, I paused. Carla was inside, humming tunelessly. In her arms, her newborn squirmed in a familiar-looking onesie, the little yellow ducks faded but unmistakable. Mira's onesie. No permission asked, no acknowledgement. Mira peeked around my legs, her brow furrowed in silent confusion. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. I could see it in the way she clutched my hand tighter, seeking something solid in a house that was crumbling beneath her. I walked away before Carla noticed me standing there, burning from the inside out. Back in our corner of the house, I sat cross-legged on the floor, pulling open the battered shoebox where I had kept what little else they hadn't yet stolen. Photos, drawings, tiny shoes, memories. I turned over a photograph of Mira at 2 years old. Her face lit up with a joy so pure it hurt to look at it now. This wasn't about old clothes or baby blankets. It was about erasing us, about taking the things that had anchored me during the hardest years and tossing them away like they had no meaning. Like we had no meaning. That night, long after Mira had fallen asleep, I lay awake staring at the cracked ceiling. They could take the house, the furniture, the heirlooms, but they wouldn't take us. They wouldn't decide what pieces of our story were worth keeping. And in that still, heavy darkness, I made a promise that curled itself deep into my bones. They could try to steal the past, but the future? That would belong to Mira and me. The house was humming with activity, but none of it was for Christmas. The wreaths stayed boxed up, the dusty garlands untouched. Instead, the focus was singular: Carla's upcoming baby. New baby clothes draped over the living room chairs, diaper bags stacked by the stairs, congratulatory cards pinned on the kitchen corkboard. I moved quietly through it all, feeling like a ghost in my own family home. Mira stayed close to my side, sensing the shift in air, the way conversations dimmed when we entered a room. Every laugh, every cheer seemed calibrated for someone else's happiness. That afternoon, while Mira napped upstairs, I overheard it. Carla's voice floated through the half-open kitchen window, clear and sharp. She was talking to Mrs. Green from next door, her words coated in honey. "Poor Anissa," Carla said with a laugh, casual and cruel. "Still clinging to mom and dad. Can't even keep a roof over her head after the divorce." The blood drained from my face. I pressed my back against the wall, the drywall cool and unyielding. Betrayal had a taste, I realized. It was metallic, bitter, coating the back of my throat. I stayed frozen until the laughter faded, every muscle locked against the scream clawing up my chest. Later, needing fresh air more desperately than pride, I took Mira to the small coffee shop downtown. She slurped her hot chocolate noisily while I stared into the swirling foam of my latte, trying to push down the nausea of humiliation. "Anissa?" I looked up. Lucy Mayers stood there, bundled in a thick scarf, her smile hesitant, brittle. I heard you're staying with your parents after everything," she said, her voice trailing off. There was pity in her eyes. Pity and something worse. Confirmation that the rumors had spread like wildfire, licking away at whatever dignity I thought I had left. I forced a laugh. Too high, too thin. "Just temporary," I lied smoothly. "You know how it is. Saves money over the holidays." Lucy nodded, too eager to believe me. She murmured some holiday pleasantries and scurried off, leaving the air around me dense with everything unspoken. I turned back to Mira, who was tracing shapes in the condensation on her cup. Without thinking, I reached out, covering her small hand with mine. Her fingers were warm, solid, real. Later, walking home in the creeping dusk, Mira chattered about gingerbread houses and Christmas songs. I answered when I could, but mostly I stayed quiet, feeling the betrayal settle deeper into my bones. Not just their betrayal, my own. For staying, for hoping, for believing even for a second that blood outweighed cruelty. That night, after Mira fell asleep, I sat on my bed and scrolled through the photo albums on my phone. Birthdays, graduations, family reunions. Each picture another lie I had told myself. Another piece of a family that only existed when it was convenient for them. One by one, I deleted them. Not out of spite, out of necessity. Sometimes survival looked like saving the only person you still had, yourself. The walk had been supposed to clear my head, but when Mira and I returned to the house, the air inside was thicker than ever. Carla's belongings were everywhere. Boxes of pastel blankets, new toys, more baby supplies than one infant could possibly need. They spilled over into the living room, pushing aside what little was left of ours. I caught Victor and Marlene's voices drifting from the kitchen, low but intentional, like they wanted me to hear. Discussions about which rooms would need rearranging, how it was only fair that Carla and the baby have more space. I didn't interrupt. I just stood there, watching my daughter's sneakers leave tiny prints on the dusty floor as she trudged up the stairs, her head bowed low. At dinner, Marlene brought it up officially, like it was a casual favor. "It would make sense," she said, spooning mashed potatoes onto her plate, "for you and Mira to share the study for a while. Carla needs the big room now that the baby's here." Victor nodded without looking at me. Carla smiled sweetly, folding her hands atop her swollen stomach like some benevolent queen. I stared at them, waiting for the punchline. None came. The betrayal landed heavier than any blow. A public cornering, carefully staged to leave no room for refusal. Later that night, I found Mira kneeling by her bed, folding her clothes into plastic grocery bags. She worked in silence, the bags crinkling softly in the dim light. When she looked up at me, her voice was so small it barely carried. "Is it because we're not important anymore, Mom?" The words split something wide open inside me. I dropped to my knees, pulling her close, holding on so tightly she squeaked. "No, baby," I whispered into her hair, tasting salt. "No, never." I sat alone in our now half-empty room after Mira fell asleep, staring at the twin mattress crammed awkwardly between the towering bookshelves. It looked like a storage closet, not a home. The memories poured in, uninvited. Birthdays spent on sidelines, favors returned with conditions. Holidays where Mira and I had been afterthoughts, years of swallowing disappointment, years of pretending crumbs were a feast. Down the hall, Carla's laughter bubbled over. Through the open door, I caught a glimpse of her nursery, bright, spotless, bursting with new things. I clenched my fists, nails biting into my palms until the sting brought clarity. Not one more step back, not one more inch lost. That night, after checking to make sure Mira was still sleeping soundly, I pulled out my old lockbox from the closet. Bank statements, tax records, credit scores. I laid them out across the floor like battle plans. No more pleading, no more waiting for scraps. They thought they had me cornered. They were wrong. The clink of spoons against bowls filled the heavy silence at breakfast. Mira stirred her cereal absently, her eyes fixed on the soggy loops swimming in milk. Carla talked loudly, bragging about the new stroller she ordered online and her plans to redecorate the nursery. Plans that, judging by the boxes stacked in the living room, were already underway. Victor sat stiffly at the head of the table, jaw working, eyes distant. Marlene fussed over Carla's coffee, refilling it without being asked. No one spoke to me. I didn't try to speak to them. The air crackled with something sour, an unspoken truth that had been festering too long. After breakfast, Victor cleared his throat and jerked his head toward the study. Wordlessly, I followed him. He shut the door behind me with a soft click, a barrier dropping between us and the noise outside. "You need to double your contribution starting next month," he said, voice flat, "or find somewhere else to live." The words landed like a slap, but I didn't flinch. I crossed my arms, steadying myself against the rage prickling at the back of my throat. "And if I can't?" I asked quietly, already knowing the answer. Victor's mouth tightened. "Then you'll be out, family or not." There it was, the final nail in a coffin I hadn't realized I was already lying inside. I looked at him, really looked, at the lines etched deeper by disappointment, at the man who once lifted me onto his shoulders and promised the world was mine to conquer. Now he couldn't even offer me a chair at his table. "Put it in writing," I said, my voice calm, almost detached. Victor blinked, thrown off for a second. Marlene poked her head into the room, Carla hovering behind her like a specter. They both stiffened, sensing the shift. "If you want to evict me," I said, "make it official." The room hummed with their stunned silence. Victor opened his mouth, then closed it again. Marlene wrung her hands. Carla rolled her eyes and turned away. I left them there, the study door swinging shut behind me. That night, Mira and I sat cross-legged on our mattress, folding clothes into neat piles. I sorted through bank statements and crumpled receipts while she hummed softly, her small voice a fragile thread of normalcy in the chaos. "They think I'm trapped," I whispered to myself as I tucked the last document into a battered manila folder. They forgot who taught me to survive. Later, I locked our door for the first time since moving back. The click of the bolt sliding home was louder than any argument I could have started. Tomorrow, I would start packing. The house breathed in a strange, weighted silence that morning. The kind of silence that made the walls seem closer, the air thicker. Carla, for once, wasn't parading through the kitchen or demanding attention. She was somewhere in the house, biding her time. Mira clung to my side, her little hand refusing to let go of mine even as we made breakfast. Something was building. I could feel it in my bones, an approaching storm gathering beyond the windows frosted with January's breath. It didn't take long for it to break. I found Mira in the hallway near the stairwell, her face pale, her body trembling like a leaf barely holding onto a branch. She launched into my arms the moment she saw me, burying her face in my sweater, her body shaking. Through the crackling fear in her voice, I caught the words. "She said you'd disappear. She said I'd be all alone." I held her tighter, my heart thudding in a rhythm that no lullaby could soothe. Carla's footsteps echoed lightly down the hall, slow and deliberate. I didn't need to see her face to know the satisfaction twisting her features. I didn't need to hear her denial to know she would lie without a second thought. I scooped Mira into my arms and carried her upstairs, shutting the door behind us like it could keep the venom out. Later, when the sun dipped low and the house sank into an uneasy twilight, Mira whispered the rest. "Auntie said, if I told you, you would leave me too." I closed my eyes, a fresh wave of fury and heartbreak crashing over me. How calculated, how cruel, threatening a child's deepest fear just to tighten her hold over us. No more swallowing it down, no more pretending it was easier to stay. I didn't march into Carla's room, didn't confront her screaming in the hallway. Rage without direction was useless. I needed something cleaner, sharper. That night I packed, not in the loud, defiant way I once imagined, quietly, purposefully. Only the essentials, Mira's favorite books, our warmest clothes, the few keepsakes they hadn't managed to erase from our lives. I watched Mira sleep, her small chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Her hand clutched the edge of her worn blanket like a lifeline. Fear has no place in our lives anymore. I choose her. I choose us. Before dawn, I left a letter on the dining table. 3 sentences, scrawled in careful, shaking handwriting. "You made your choice. Now I make mine. Goodbye." As I closed the door behind us, the cold air bit at my cheeks. But it was cleaner out here, sharper. The kind of cold that woke you up, made you move, made you live. I adjusted Mira's blanket tighter around her as she dozed against my shoulder. We walked into the gray morning together, leaving the dust and the echoes of broken promises behind. Morning sunlight poured through the narrow window of our new apartment, casting golden puddles on the bare wooden floor. Mira stretched beside me on our second-hand mattress, her tiny fists rubbing sleep from her eyes. It was still early, the city outside just beginning to hum to life, but inside our small space, there was only stillness, clean, unheavy. I sat up slowly, breathing in the unfamiliar air. It smelled faintly of paint and winter. No scent of brewing coffee from downstairs. No sharp voice calling us to hurry. No invisible weight pressing on my chest. Freedom was quieter than I imagined. It hadn't been an easy first night. The walls creaked. The heater sputtered. Mira had clung to me through every unfamiliar sound. But as she slept now, her face relaxed. Her body sprawled freely across the mattress. I knew the anxiety had been worth it. I rose carefully, padding across the cold floor to where my phone rested on a cracked nightstand. Notifications blinked up at me. Junk mail, a weather alert, and one from the bank. Foreclosure proceedings had begun. The old house, the house where laughter once lived and slowly rotted into silence, was now just a line in a document, a property to be repossessed. I stared at the screen longer than necessary, waiting for something. Guilt, maybe. Triumph, perhaps. What came was a slow, hollow ache. Victor's tired scowl. Marlene's stiff back turned away from me. Carla's smile sharp enough to cut. I had spent so long fighting for a place at their table, only to realize the table had never been meant for me. I set the phone down and went to the kitchen. 2 steps from the bed, 2 steps toward a life that was ours alone. Mira joined me, her messy hair sticking out in every direction. Together, we poured cereal into chipped bowls and giggled when half of it ended up on the floor. Later, we walked hand in hand to the community center, where I enrolled Mira in a new school. The walls were bright, the staff friendly, and Mira's shy smile grew a little braver with every passing minute. On the way home, we stopped by a thrift store, picking out a battered but sturdy couch. Mira picked a faded pillow with cartoon dogs on it, hugging it to her chest like it was made of gold. For the first time in weeks, laughter spilled between us, clumsy, genuine, healing. That night, after Mira drifted off in a nest of mismatched blankets, I sat by the window, watching the lights of Asheville flicker against the navy blue sky. I opened a battered journal, one I hadn't touched in years. Maybe forgiveness will come someday, but healing, that starts now. I glanced over at Mira, her soft breathing steady and sure. Tomorrow wasn't promised. Tomorrow might still bring struggle, but tonight, the future was ours, and it was enough. Sometimes walking away isn't about giving up. It's about choosing yourself, choosing peace, and protecting the people who matter most. I spent too many years thinking loyalty meant staying silent, enduring pain, and sacrificing my own worth. But healing only begins when we stop asking for a seat at tables where we were never truly welcome. Have you ever faced a moment where choosing yourself felt like the hardest but most necessary thing to do? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Tell me where you're watching from, or if this story touched you, leave a 1-inch in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video and want to hear more real, heartfelt stories that resonate with life here in America, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Your voice matters, and you are never as alone as you think. See you in the next story.